Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Riverdale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, this being the graduation episode, it is a very emotional and it just gets you a little nostalgic and at the same time sad, just because it's like for multiple characters kind of looking back to stuff at the beginning of the series to where they are now. I mean, in many different regards. Archie not having his dad anymore. Veronica, her relationship with her dad being completely different because, obviously she had a much more solid relationship with her dad, and obviously that's it's had many ups and downs over the course of the series, even to the point he was like, oh, I want you to wear these pearls just for the last day. And then she had him on, but then she thought about when her, Kevin, and Betty are talking, and he was like, oh, is it true what they say about your dad? She's like, no, I believe in my dad. And she takes the pearls off because it's like, yeah, her dad isn't who she thought he was at one point in time. Just how much has changed for him. I even love the intro where, Jughead is talking about everything that happened in Riverdale. I mean, let's not forget, Riverdale, I think this always speaks volumes too. Remember in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, they look at Riverdale like, oh my god, we have to go to Riverdale? Oh my god, that's like murder capital of the world. Like, there's even you go to the sign in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina and it brings that up. It's like, that place had such a terrible, terrible reputation. And it's like, they bring up everything that's happened, to Jason's murder by his and Cheryl's dad, the Black Hood, the Gargoyle King, the Stony Preps, and now the Artur, and finding out, oh, it's Jelly being behind it. And I thought it was such an interesting perspective that Jughead had on it, where it's like, this town is full of darkness. This ends up being a part of Betty's speech at the end of the episode. Is like, well, I mean, near the when they graduate, is the whole aspect of they can at least remember Riverdale when it wasn't this terrible place, like before the place got the terrible reputation. Because it is the thing, we've seen these characters all deal with the ups and downs that is Riverdale, the darkness. They've come out of it, I'd say at the very least, stronger because of it. But to realize well, look, because we never really gotten an opportunity to see how Riverdale has affected other people. So to see Jellybean and all the other kids affected like that, it shows you, I think that's such an interesting thing, where it's we've seen the people who survived this, who've grown from it, but then see a younger generation who's become warped by it, and so that's such a fascinating thing, because the general public of Riverdale, we've never really seen their reactions to everything that's going down over the course of the series so far. All we've ever really seen is getting the reactions and the developments of the core cast of characters that we followed. Then on top of everything, you also have Archie learning the news. Hey, he doesn't get to graduate with his class, because that was a big concern with everything, but despite all his hard work, it's even with summer school, you won't graduate. He'd have to repeat his senior year. So that's kind of a rough thing for Archie, because can I at least, yes, you can walk with your class, because no one will blame you considering the year that you've had. And he's like, thanks, Mr. Weatherby, And, I can kind of understand. I mean, granted, I've not going through what Archie's going through, but it just, at least on an educational level, I had to repeat my junior year. Luckily, just because of the way my credits worked out and stuff like that, I was fortunate enough I got to, graduate, in February of 2011, because I was supposed to graduate, in 2010. So I technically graduated 6 months later, just because of just stuff. I won't get into it, but I can kind of understand, that whole thing of want to kind of graduate your class. I mean, granted, it was kind of on me, the reason why I didn't. So it's no one's fault. There's no external circumstances like Archie's was. It was just my own bullshit at the time. Like I said, it's not worth getting into, but it kind of made me think about that a little bit. But nevertheless, but Archie's not telling anyone when it comes to Jughead's so what if, he's yeah, summer school for me, but hey, I'm graduating. He's yeah. I guess the main reason he didn't tell anyone, because it's if he told them, it basically ruined their celebration. This will be their last time together, and their last time in school together, so he didn't want to ruin that, because the entire time during graduation, all they'd ever do is be thinking oh man, it sucks, Archie's going to be repeating this year and stuff like that. And she kind of reminds, once again, hey, Trails of Cold Steel kind of remind me a little bit of two spoilers. When the rest of the class graduates and Rain is the only one of class 7 that stays behind. It made me think of that. But regardless, tangents and all that. He would have been the only one in his class to kind of, ultimately stay behind. So that would have been, especially when we actually think about it, Archie's not really tight with, everyone he's tight with is in his grade. He's not tight with any of, because we haven't even really seen a lot of interactions with, the younger like grades at the school. Like it's just, you know, Archie's got his group. I mean, considering everything they've been through, the life and death situations, the terrible stuff that's going down in Riverdale, create some bonds. So it's like outside of that, we don't really see him interact with people. And it ends up being something Betty ends up talking about. A lot of like people that aren't there. There's some, obviously some students that are dead. Some parents that are not around anymore, you know, because that's even more of an ostracizing situation. It's like, not only is he not graduating, but also his dad's not there. Like, at least if his dad was there, there'd be like some form of, I think it'd make him at least feel a little bit better about it. But it's just like seeing everyone happy with their entire family, moms and dads. Granted, yeah, Betty's situation is what it is, but at the very least, like, she has both, you know, FP and her mom. So it still balances out. You know, everyone's got their situation, you know, so it's just, I'm sure that just a little salt in the wounds. You know, it's just like that Archie's got to face this, you know, he's still got his mom, and his mom telling him, it's like, it's okay, like, you know, your dad is here with us, you know. There's also like the army, like, sign up. And you see Archie and you're thinking like he might start thinking about it. And it does seem like that is the case, especially when he got on stage and he's opening up his own thing and there's no diploma. It's like, yeah. And he sees saw those people from the army like clapping in the crowd and walking away. And I think that solidified it in his mind, because that's been the thing for Archie. Like, whereas everyone else in the crew had plans, he's never really been sure about where he's going to go. Like, I mean, considering like because everyone's lives have been turned upside down, but I feel like at the core of it, Archie's probably has been affected the most. I think things have never been the same, especially like since his dad passed. That kind of threw a wrench in everything for him, you know? So I think that's always been a thing for Archie. Like, he's kind of lost himself quite a bit over the course of the series in many different regards. And I think, you know, at a crucial moment like this in his life, you know, that entering in that stage of his life, sadly, he doesn't have his dad by his side, you know, and I think that's a rough thing for anyone under those circumstances, you know. I even love that Cheryl is literally the only one wearing red. Everyone else is wearing blue. It is kind of sad, though. Like, obviously, like, Tony's locker still filled with stuff in her grandma's like, oh, but your locker's still filled. She's like, yeah, I'll come clean it out this weekend. And it's like, you know, it's got all these memories of the people she's met and known, and even, you know, pictures of her, you know, girlfriend, obviously, that being Cheryl. But Cheryl didn't want to interrupt, so she just kind of stayed away. And so, obviously, you know, there's a time capsule thing, which I thought was pretty dope. Everyone putting something in, significant things to each and every one of them. I was actually surprised when Jughead put in his beanie. I was like, oh, shit. I mean, because obviously it's such a signature thing for Jughead that I just thought that was interesting. I mean, hell, he's even got something to deal with where it's like his dad is planning to move back. When he's taking Jelly Bean home to live with her mom again, he's going to stay too, because he's like, well, she needs her entire family around her, so I can't just leave her with her mom, because, you know, this is a literal cry out for help. And Jughead wants to go back too. He's like, maybe after, you know, when I'm at college, I can come back and kind of, it's like, no, you stay at college. It's like, you're the first Jones to end up in college. You need to stay there, you know? Because I think it's like, you can't just keep putting your life on hold for the rest of us. The family will be here. We'll figure things out on our own. But I think it is a thing of like, hey, you've got your own life to live too. You got to figure things out for yourself. Betty doesn't have, you know, because Alice doesn't have anyone. Like, Polly and the twins aren't around. The whole Charles situation. Now FP's leaving. Like, you know, and even Betty's going off. So Alice is like, I'm going to be stuck alone. But, you know, Betty's like, even if it's just you and me, like with Turkey, like we'll make this happen. We'll make this work, Mom, you know? So obviously Veronica's, well, her family situation being what it is, obviously what was set up last episode. I'm curious to see, are we going to see a lot more of Hermosa in the future? I mean, considering how things play out at the end of the episode, I'm sure, but, you know, I'll get to that, you know, soon enough. But Veronica and Archie spent a night together, and she even questioned him about the whole army thing. But for him, it's like, because he was thinking about the fact is, it's interesting, like, while the rest of their class was thinking about, you know, what their future was going to be, they were all going off to prepare for war. And she's like, you're not getting crazy ideas. He's like, no, not at all. But sadly, you know, in that moment at graduation, it sparked, and he decided to sign up. And while they were all celebrating, Archie brought it up because this will be an opportunity. Not only does he feel like this will be this, he treats it as just the same thing as him signing up for the Naval Academy, which Veronica's like, no, it's different because this is you literally going to war and you could easily die, especially after Archie made that whole speech about, hey, let's meet back up here in a year, no matter what we do, whatever is going on in our lives, meet up at Pops. And we'll do it like every year afterwards. And then dropping that bomb on them, and then Veronica just being so upset. Even later on, Jughead being like, yeah, doesn't it seem like they've been off? And Betty tells him the truth about what most likely happened between Archie and Veronica. And it seemed like things are, obviously, even just like the day after, you can tell like things are still a little awkward. Like, I love you. And it's like, I love you too. But it's still like, ugh. So Jughead's dropping off Archie. Betty and Veronica are spending time together, and Betty's like, I'm sorry, Veronica. She's like, no, don't be sorry. I'm not mad at you. It's just so much happening at once for her. It's like, what really upsets her the most is like, it just seemed like it came out of nowhere. Like, they didn't really have like their last hurrah, like things being on the best of terms. Things sadly kind of fizzled out. It wasn't like a big goodbye. And, and that's what Veronica was worried about. She's like, what if I didn't hug him? I didn't say goodbye. But it's like, luckily they got there in time. I did like that Jughead and Archie had their moment too, where it's like, he's like, are we good? It's like, yeah, we always will be, because Jughead is not only like his best friend, that's his brother, So I'm glad to see things are kind of like cool with the entire group, And so they all, ended up saying their goodbyes, and even Jughead saying it later on, like, after Archie left, it just, the glue that held their group together kind of fell apart. Veronica went away, first, then Betty, especially because him and Betty weren't on the best terms. It's like they never talked about the whole her and Archie thing, but it led to them kind of having a fallout too. I mean, that was also the worry. That's why Veronica and Archie didn't want to tell, but like, who knows? Maybe with it out there in the open, and if Archie was still around, maybe the group could have gotten past it, but them being kind of going their separate ways, it's especially sad because it's like the bonds they were able to create, because Archie, I think, was thinking about it, on their bus ride, thinking about, Betty, Jughead, even the first time they met Veronica, them all sitting together at Pops, like the bond that they created, and just to see that bond that they built so many years ago kind of sadly fizzle out to what it is now. It's to the point that Jughead was the only one left, and it's like, where do we go from here? And Betty's, it's like Jughead suggesting, hey, we both focus on college, and then we kind of see where things kind of go from there. That because we still love each other, and we always will, but we just kind of have to take time apart to kind of figure things out, sadly. This is like the age of breakups because sadly we see we see that other people are kind of, to our knowledge, it looks like Kev and Thing are okay. I don't know if they ever explained it, like what's going to happen to Archie's gym. I don't think he ever explained like what's going. I guess maybe Kevin's dad's going to look after it because he kind of like helps run. To be fair, he got reinstated by Hiram when they were looking for those kids, because it turns out they were all sleeping underneath the gym after it closed, like underneath the ring. So maybe whether he's back full time or not, especially because FP is leaving, that probably leaves room. So he might be like, he does that side as a side thing, or maybe it's a situation where he works at the gym or the center, like on the side while he's still doing the sheriff. Like they didn't make a point of it in the episode, but maybe. But as I was bringing up earlier, Fang and Kevin seem like they're still together. But hey, another breakup is, Alice and FP. It's like, is this kind of the end of our story? Alice was asking if FP is like, I hope not. So it's like, she's like, but I understand why you're doing this and I love you for it. So hopefully things kind of pick up from there. But you also had the Cheryl and Tony thing. Cheryl, it's interesting because her mom showed up at her graduation. She's like, what are you doing here? She's like, oh, you think I'd miss out on my daughter graduating? But also it's like she was saying that she was going to turn herself in because that way I get, I pay for most of the crimes I've committed. And, because she wants to at least do some semblance of restoring, at least bringing some honor and, respect to the Blossom name. And that actually inspired Cheryl because she was already kind of going down that path because she wanted to make things right with Tony's grandma and just like, what the Blossom name and the Blossom family has done. And she goes that a little further because she wants Tony to go off to college without her, because it's like, I need to stay here and rectify a lot. The Blossom family has done so much terrible shit to this town that she wants to take time to make up for it. So her and Tony have to say goodbye for now. But it's like, at the end of the day, they're still hopeful that everything will kind of work out at the end, And so she's planning on, it's like, oh, let's go back to Thornhill. Granted, yes, we're going to have to rebuild it after I burnt it down in my youth. I love how she's talking like that was so damn long ago. But once again, just like all the stuff that's transpired in this town and just so many damn goodbyes. It's so crazy. Because obviously I brought this, I might have brought this up last episode, but this was, well, at least would have been the season finale, because this would have been like episode 22 of season 4. So you can definitely, where the story is and how everything plays out, you can definitely see this being like, oh, this was definitely the season finale. It's actually kind of sad because, I brought up that Archie was going to be the last one in Riverdale, but in actuality, it ended up being Jughead because, well, he, didn't feel like staying at the Cooper's house because it's like, yeah, I kind of really have no reason to stay here. And then he stayed at Archie's because I didn't realize his mom was, it makes sense, I guess, because she has like little to no reason to stay in that house anymore, because I'm sure like it just brings back memories, and it's like, it's just going to be a lonely place, especially with, no Fred and no Archie. So she sold that, and obviously he was staying there for his life, which is almost that coming full circle, because let's remember, like, that's where Jughead was at the beginning of this series, kind of staying at the drive-in. That was where he was living, at the time, because obviously things were complicated between him and his dad, which it's even nice to see where their relationship has, come over the course of this series. So it's just interesting to see how much growth. Because I do like that, hey, it started with this core crew from the beginning, and to see, like, at the end, they're the main focus. Because we still don't know where everyone ended up at the end of all of this. I am curious to see what they do with the whole Josie situation, because they did bring it up, because, like, Kevin threw in, like, some of his stuff. Some of the musical related stuff, and Josie's headphones is like, oh, I wish she was here with us. It's like, right, obviously, once again, I didn't see Katie Keene, and sadly it got canceled, but I'm curious to see, would they fold her story and potentially any Katie Keene stuff into Riverdale in some shape or form, it kind of already did, introducing Katie's boyfriend last episode, played by Zane Holtz. Was that last episode? Episode before last? I think that was the last episode, right? My memory's terrible. It was probably the one before last, but regardless. So, with all of that, I'm just really curious. I'm also, I don't think it usually doesn't work vice versa. There's probably some references I've missed. I feel like the Riverdale ones in Chilling Adventures, the references and the wink and nods are a little more prevalent than I get vice versa. Because obviously Greendale's popped up in this, but granted, it's a different Greendale than the one. And I don't think it's implied it's the same universe. Because obviously in the comic books it is, but I think they kind of skirt around that. Because there's a lot of inconsistency where you're like, yeah, especially considering like you've seen actors from, like I've mentioned it before, actors who have been on Riverdale in, so it's like you kind of would have to treat it as more like an alternate universe rather than the actual same universe, because it would just, the continuity wouldn't work, just because, like I said characters pop up in like little moments here as different characters, so I don't think it would work. But I'm just curious, like, would there be any more like winks and nods or references to Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, since it's done from the TV point of view, because obviously the story, I think there's still plans to continue it in a comic book, but for now the TV show itself, the story for the TV show is done. But I'm curious, like, will that kind of play any role in it? But Jughead being the last one to leave and being the only one that showed up a year later, I didn't even talk about it, but like Veronica had signed Pops back over to Pops. So that was kind of, neat. I think, especially because everything that Pops had to go through because of like, Hiram and everything, and her kind of taking it back from her dad and now giving it back to Pop, but, Jughead, sadly not meeting up with his friends, and even saying it would be 6 more years before we'd all meet up again. And he's like, of course, the one thing that would end up uniting us is a tragedy, a mystery. But he's like, but that's a story for another time, which obviously is like, oh, that would have been, because I thought it was interesting because like obviously it sets up like, because it's a little cliffhangery, yet it's still very resolved compared to most seasons. Most seasons have a very heavy like cliffhanger ending to it, but this ends off on a solid enough note that you're like, okay, but it's still cliffhangery because you're like, oh. And I was, because I thought I remember reading that, and it's like, okay, so we definitely are getting a time skip. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. It's actually not even a time skip. I thought, well, I mean, I was talking about it recently, but there's actually another time skip I've always thought, and I don't know if they'd ever do this for the show. I don't see them doing it now, but my thought was potentially at the end of Riverdale, you probably end up getting all of the main characters, Betty, Jughead, Archie, Veronica, being played by their parents, the actors who play their parents. That was all because obviously they played the younger versions of their parents when they were in school in season 3. The reason why I feel like that probably won't happen, just because obviously Luke Perry passing away, so I don't see that happening. But that was always, like way before then, that was always my vision because of that episode. I was like, oh, so eventually when they're older, they'll most likely get the actors who play their parents to play older versions of their characters. So Luke Perry would have played like an older Archie. That was always kind of my vision. And like I said, with Luke Perry passing, I doubt that would be. I don't even know if that was ever like in the cards in the beginning, but I just thought just because of the parallels of they played the younger version of their parents, like why not kind of do vice versa? But yeah, that was always something in the back of my mind. But like I said, I remember reading somewhere about there being a time skip. And they're saying it's a 5-year time skip. Technically, it's a 7-year time skip, which I wasn't expecting. Because I swear I saw 5 years somewhere, but I could be mistaken. It might have just been like a time skip. It's like that it said a time skip and it never gave an exact number. Maybe it did. I don't remember. But yeah, that's interesting. Hey, I literally made a video recently talking about like I'm a big fan of time skips and what it does storytelling wise, especially for this because there's so much history to fill in. I was like, what's up with everyone? Like, why did they not meet up the year after they graduated? Also, I guess the wounds were still kind of fairly fresh, but then it's like, what about the next 6 years? Why didn't they meet up? What is this tragedy? Is somebody getting killed off in this time skip? And it's also Jughead saying like how much they changed. And that was also a thought I had too. Like I figured relationships would change too. Like I felt like maybe when it's all said and done, Archie and Betty would still end up together. They'd kind of sadly end up like I just figured like a lot of the relationships would change just because I mean to be fair that's always the case. Like your life is so different pre and post high school so it's like different worlds. So not everyone gets to be with their like high school sweetheart all the way through, but it's like how much everyone's change is going to be interesting. Has Archie been in the army all 6 years? Has stuff happened? What about Veronica? Has she become like her dad in that time frame? What about Betty? Like, considering her family history and stuff like that, has that taken any more root? Jughead, like, there are just so many questions. Has Cheryl been able to successfully bring light to the Blossom names? There are so many questions. Where are these other characters? Like, we'll meet everyone a little bit older, which I also think is kind of interesting. I'd say because of this time skip, I'd say roughly the characters will all be about the same age as their respective actors. Because obviously, like, everyone was kind of like, I think the actor who plays Archie was like the youngest of the main cast, because I think he was like 19 at the beginning of the series. I could be mistaken. At least when the show was like originally coming out, I think he was 19. It might have even been around season 2. I want to say it was season 1, but everyone else is like in their like earlier 20s. So I get the feeling now adding in a 7-year time skip puts them at least closer to their actual age. So I think that's pretty interesting. I always think, because something else did that too, where I was like, oh, that's actually pretty dope that this time skip makes you the character actually the same age as the actor. I can't think of it right now. But regardless, I'm really interested to see what this next episode. There was a preview. I made damn sure not to watch the preview because I don't want it spoiled for me. I can't wait to find out like what's happened, what's changed in this time frame. What is this tragedy that brought everyone together? Hell, like that means we're also going to be dealing with like an older Jelly Bean, and like, did she get better? Or I mean, Betty made that whole speech at the graduation, but like, what has happened in Riverdale? Like, has that younger generation, were they able to hold on to their childhood even just for that moment? Was there more tragedies that took place, not just the one that brings everyone together? Did Riverdale have any more murders and just terrible darkness? Or did it kind of leave when they left, but then that said darkness finds a way to draw them all back? Which I was almost thinking, like, what storyline does that to a certain extent? I was like, oh, I'm sure there's others, but the one that immediately comes to my mind, I was like, oh, it. I was like, all right, that's kind of this. I mean, granted, it's a much bigger time skip, but still, for them all to kind of come back together. But I'm really interested to see where the rest of season 5 is going to take us with this. Now that we've kind of finished out the arc that was the end of season 4, I'm curious to see where the rest of the arc of season 5 takes us. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.